Warning, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Peter Spina, president of GoldSeek.com, coming to you live from the Czech Republic. It's a pleasure for us to do our next live event for GoldSeek.com. It's a pleasure today to have Rudi Fronk, the CEO and chairman of Seabridge Gold, and Jim Willie from the Hat Trick Letter. Today we'll begin with Rudi Fronk, who will be providing us with an update with the KSM project's latest progress from the last year since our last presentation in the fall. And then after that, we will open it up to some questions that we've received so far. And if you would like to send over some questions, you'll be able to do so through the platform. There is a questions section on your menu there. And then we'll follow that with questions and answers from Jim Willie. And again, if you'd like to send in some more questions, feel free to send it through the system or also through the GoldSeek.com website. So at this time, it's a pleasure to introduce you to Rudi Fronk. He's Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Seabridge Gold. He has over 30 years of experience in the gold business, primarily as a senior officer and director of publicly traded companies. From 1999 until June 2012, Mr. Fronk served as President and CEO of Seabridge Gold. Prior to Seabridge Gold, Mr. Fronk held senior management positions with Greenstone Resources, Columbia Resources, Riverside Associates, and other resource companies. Mr. Fronk is a graduate of Columbia University, from which he holds a Bachelor's of Science in Mining Engineering and Master's of Science in Mineral Economics. Rudi, it's a pleasure to have you back on.
Peter, it's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. The primary interest in today's live event is to provide us with an update with your progress at KSM from last year. Last year in our presentation, you were at that time doing drilling at the project up in British Columbia, focusing on a very prospective area called Deep Kerr. So we look forward to you giving us an update to how the drill season proceeded up there. And at this time, I'll go ahead and give you presentation controls.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'd be happy to update on the drilling success we had at Deep Kerr, as well as some other recent developments at KSM. I have about a dozen or so slides to go through here, so I will start with the presentation. I will be making forward-looking statements during this presentation. The case for Seabridge. First, reserves. We now have 45 million ounces of proven and probable gold reserves, plus 10 billion pounds of copper. This puts us actually in the top 10 in the world in terms of gold reserves. We have more gold reserves than Agnico Eagle, Yamana, and Kinross, which actually comes as a surprise to most people. Second point is our share count. We only have 47 million shares outstanding today. One of our guiding principles from the beginning, which started in 1999, was to provide our shareholders with the best leverage play to a rising gold price. And we thought the best way to do that was to try and maximize gold ownership on a per-share basis. We've now gone 14 straight years with increasing our shareholders' exposure to gold while minimizing equity dilution. If you look at us today, with nearly 1 ounce of gold reserves per common share outstanding, we provide 5 to 10 times more gold ownership on a per-share basis than any other company in our space. Third is our valuation. At $8 per reserve ounce in the ground, we are one of the least expensive gold plays in the industry. In fact, if you look at our gold ownership, you can buy 1 share of Seabridge for $8, and for that you get exposure to 1 ounce of gold reserves in the ground. This is one of the lowest valuations in the business. We believe that as this year unfolds and we meet our objective, that we will see a significant re-rating of our shares in the marketplace. Political risk. I've been involved in projects all around the globe. There's no doubt in my mind, as well as other companies, that the best place to be in developing a large gold copper project is in Canada. And last but not least, as Peter alluded to, is our exploration success we achieved last year and our excitement that we have going forward with additional additions we plan to make to our existing reserves, which should come at higher grade and also improve the overall project economics. KSM, which I'll be spending most of my time on here today, is now the largest undeveloped gold copper project in the world today. Since 2006, we've spent about $180 million at KSM between exploration, engineering, and permitting. We now have 2.2 billion tons of proven and probable gold reserves that contain 38 million ounces of gold and 10 billion pounds of copper, plus significant quantities of silver and molybdenum on top of that. With our 2.2 billion tons of reserves we have today, we already show a mine life in excess of 50 years, one of the longest mine lives that anyone can show on the planet. In addition to our reserves, we also have another 2.2 billion tons of additional resources, which could extend this mine life beyond 100 years. There's a lot of myths and false points in the marketplace today regarding KSM and Seabridge. There's no question that over the past few years, a number of the larger undeveloped gold-copper projects around the world have run into problems. We don't see that KSM has these problems, and I will walk you through 6 points today that I think you should know about KSM, which will distinguish KSM from some of these other challenge projects around the world. First is location. KSM has some tremendous logistical advantages compared to other projects. First, we're near the existing road network in British Columbia. Just to the north of us was the old Eskay Creek mine that was operated by Barrick, and just to the south of us was the old Grand Duke mine that was operated by Newmont. Just to the east of the KSM project, we have Highway 37, which is the major north-south highway that connects British Columbia to Alaska. Being close to existing roads is a big plus. Second is our proximity to the town of Stewart. Stewart is important because it provides year-round port access to the Pacific Ocean, which allows us to bring supplies in by ship to the project, and at some point when the mine is up and running, to bring our concentrate out, put it on a ship, and deliver it to a hungry smelter on the Pacific Rim. But probably the most important logistical advantage to KSM is access to cheap power. Right now, the governments of British Columbia and the federal government of Canada are extending the power grid right up Highway 37. The power that will be furnished up this transmission line is all hydro-sourced, meaning that we can buy power for about 5 cents per kilowatt hour right off the grid. If you look at some of these other larger projects around the world in places like Mongolia, Chile, even Alaska, Peru, and other big project jurisdiction areas, they have to build power plants for the big projects. Will cost at least $1 billion. We don't have to do that. The government is actually furnishing the line for us, and we can buy power off the grid for about a quarter of what it would cost if we were generating our own power. And the last advantage of the KSM is that the project sits on an area that has no local people sitting there. Matter of fact, the closest population center to KSM is more than 100 kilometers away. We will not have to displace any people or any existing way of life. Second is jurisdiction. In my 30 years in the business, I've been involved with big projects around the world. There's no doubt in my mind that Canada is the best place to operate as a mining company. In Canada, you have proven land tenure, you have one of the lowest tax bases in the world, tax rates in the world, and you have a regulatory environment that has defined timelines and defined procedures that you need to go through to get a project approved for construction. Next is community support. Projects that have the support of the local communities are getting approved. Projects that don't are simply not getting approved. We've worked very hard on community support, both with indigenous peoples as well as local communities since 2008. We now have strong public expressions of support from the Niska Nation as well as the Gitxsan Nation. We're well on our way to completing impact benefit agreements with all of the First Nations that our project would come in touch with. We also have close working relationships with the local towns. In fact, Smithers, Terrace, and Stewart, the three closest population centers, all have publicly endorsed the project on a go-forward basis. Next is project economics. The big companies today are looking for projects in safe jurisdictions that are capital efficient. When you look at KSM as a project, it is about as good as it gets in terms of what it can deliver in terms of capital efficiency, mine life, and also jurisdictional parameters. Our reserve grades are similar to other large mines operated very profitably by the major companies around the world today. Because we have cheap power, our operating costs will be a lot lower than the other projects. In fact, if you look at our total costs, if you include the upfront capital, all of the sustaining capital over the 55-year mine life, the operating costs, as well as the closure costs, our estimated total cost of production is less than $700 per ounce at today's metal prices. This compares to projects around the world today by the majors that have an average all-in cost of about $1,000 per ounce. And then last but not least is our belief that the new high-grade discoveries that we've made at Deep Kerr and perhaps other areas are likely to further enhance the project economics as we go forward. Turning now to the discovery we made last year. From 2006 to 2012, we focused on the near-surface deposits that now comprise our 2.2 billion tons of reserves. In 2013, our geologists finally were let loose to look for what else they can find at better grades on our project area. And in 2013, they found and now have defined an initial resource at the Deep Kerr zone, where we've now defined a resource of 515 million tons of 0.53% copper and just over 0.3 of a gram gold. This compares very favorably to some of the larger projects that are operating today by the majors. Batu Hijau is Newmont's most successful mine in Indonesia. Our copper and gold grades are higher than that. Bingham Canyon is one of the historic big mines in the United States. It's now operated by Rio Tinto. Our copper and gold grades are better than that. Cadia East is a block cave mining operation in Australia. Both our copper and gold, copper grade is higher than theirs, and our gold grade is not as high, but on a combined metal value, it is better. Grasberg is probably the best project you'll find anywhere in the world. They have substantial grades, but they do operate in Indonesia, which brings on a whole other set of risks. And then finally, the big project by Rio Tinto in Mongolia. When you look at KSM, especially Deep Kerr, it is as good, if not better, than the big mines that have been the successful operations for the big companies over the past decade or more. And in fact, if you look at what we think we have going forward, we believe that the best is yet to come on Deep Kerr. This next slide shows a cross-section of the project where you can see near the surface, where you see all the different colors and the little squares. That's the block model of the open pit Kerr deposit, which contains a portion of our 2.2 billion tons. And right underneath that, where you see the extensions of the drills that were made last season, you can see that we've now defined a much larger area at Deep Kerr. In fact, in this area now, you're looking at dimensions of over 1.5 kilometers long, over 500 meters wide, and up to 600 meters, more than 500 meters of vertical extent, and up to 600 meters wide. And if you look at all the way to the left, that last drill hole there, which is drill hole 34, that intersected 640 meters of 0.85% copper and 0.42 grams per ton gold. We believe that this project extends to the north at better grades than what we have found already. The other nice thing about this project, or this new deposit, is that it can be accessed from the valley floor through adits and then mined very cost effectively as a large tonnage underground block cave operation. A lot of the big projects around the world now are moving towards block caves, as block caving technology has improved dramatically over the past few years, and you're looking at operating costs from a block cave that challenge those of a big open pit without experiencing the environmental issues that large open pits bring to the forefront. Advancing quickly. A big part of our push over the past few years has been to complete the environmental approval process both federally and provincially. In 2013, we filed our environmental assessment application and our environmental impact statement with the regulators. This was a 35,000-page document. It was the largest and most comprehensive application ever made in Canada. We believe that as a result of the work we've done, the interaction we've had with First Nations and Treaty Nations, as well as the regulators over the past several years, that our project will be finally approved this summer. Getting the environmental assessment approved for this project is a major de-risking that we believe will play well in the marketplace. Also, we believe that the project will only get better as we continue to define higher grade resources, not only at Deep Kerr, but at other areas where we think we have the large tonnage, bulk mineable, higher grade potential. So what will drive value going forward? If you look over the next 12 months, what we think we can achieve, first and foremost, is the environmental assessment process. Having a project that's approved by the regulators adds value to the project. It's a major de-risking that the majors will pay for in any joint venture negotiation. And we expect this approval sometime this summer. We've slated July 2014 when we expect to have the approval from the provincial regulators, and then within 60 days of that, the approval from the federal regulators. Next is exploration success. We have $16 million committed this year for additional drilling at Deep Kerr. We're opening the camp right now. Fortunately, it was a low snow year at KSM this year. We expect the rigs to start turning by the end of this month or early June. And then last and finally is our belief that as the project advances through the environmental assessment process, as the exploration success we're seeing now, that we'll be able to obtain a joint venture partner that will be able to come in and finally build this project. Our goal in a joint venture negotiation is to minimize our capital exposure of the project as we go forward and maximize our interest in the project. The discovery of Deep Kerr has definitely made a big impact in the type of companies we're talking with on joint venture potential now. Up until recently, KSM was viewed as a gold-dominated project, and most of our discussion was with the gold majors. Unfortunately, over the past couple of years, the gold majors have definitely hit the wall in terms of their own project development, cost overruns, and other factors affecting the big projects, and have been flat on their back. With the discovery of Deep Kerr, we're now seeing strong interest coming in from the big base metal companies, companies that have market caps much larger than the big gold majors, much more financial resources, and better technical expertise in developing projects of this size. We believe that over the next 12 months, subject to market conditions, that we'll be able to achieve a joint venture under the right terms for Seabridge, which will result in significant value additions to our shareholders. Finally, just a summary slide in terms of who we are. We are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. About 95% of our volume is in New York. We have a full NYSE listing. We also have a secondary listing in Toronto. We are included in the GDXJ in the U.S. Our share structure, as I touched on previously, a low share count and fully diluted, less than 50 million shares outstanding. We have a very strong balance sheet, no debt. We started the year with more than $30 million in working capital. We believe that'll get us comfortably through this year. Insiders own a lot of this company. If you look at insiders, including Albert Friedberg, officers, directors, and other related parties, we own over 30% of this company. And then on top of that, we have strong institutional shareholders as well, including Weiss and Royce out of New York. And finally, Royal Gold is a strategic investor in us as well. They invested $48 million into Seabridge over the past several years, and for that they now have an option to acquire a 2% NSR on the gold and the silver at KSM, for which they'd have to make a $160 million further cash payment over the next bit of time. So with that, Peter, I'd be happy to open it up to questions.
Great, thank you. Well, before we have some questions. I wanted to discuss a little bit more about the success of Deep Kerr, because to me that sounds like really the game changer here at KSM. Your copper grades are coming in at 2 to 3 times the average. It seems like the economics and now the focus, it's really changed the project in a big way. If you just maybe comment on that more.
Yeah, well, you know, the economics at KSM as it exists today is actually quite nice. Being able to show a project that has a 55-year mine life, producing gold at total all-in costs of less than $700 an ounce, does put it on the top of the list of any of the big undeveloped gold copper projects around the world today. But Deep Kerr has definitely been a game changer for us, in that it's showing that this project has a lot more legs to it than the existing reserves we've already defined, that the legs to this project may come at significantly higher grade than what we've seen to this point in time. But as I touched on, most importantly, by finding a higher grade copper deposit, we are now seeing the attention and being attracted to the larger base metal companies that have the financial and technical resources to build mines the size of KSM, and are actively looking for projects in safer jurisdictions than they're operating in today. So I think it's been a game changer for us, not only in terms of the grade, but also the type and the number of companies that are now engaging with us on potential joint venture discussions.
Fantastic. And we've got quite a few questions here, so we'll just select a few here before our time runs out. First question is coming from Mark from Florida, and he wants to know about the impact of the mine once in production. What kind of impact would it have on the local Native American communities? He's asking more specifically about the economic opportunities, and he says it sounds like there isn't much in the way of opportunities in the area right now. So how significant would this mine be to the locals there?
Well, it'll be a very significant project to locals. During the construction period, we'll have over 4,000 employees working directly at the mine site, plus obviously all the affiliated jobs that come from the supporting of a mine construction at that size. During operation, this mine will employ more than 1,000 people. It'll generate huge tax bases for the governments, both in BC and in Canada, as well as the indigenous people in Canada share in the mineral royalty tax that goes to the government that the BC government shares with them. We've been very cognizant of the First Nation involvement there. There are partners in this transaction. They've been there first, and we need to make sure that what we're designing here is not only economically robust, but it's also environmentally sound. We entered into the environmental assessment process in 2008 when we filed our project description document. And since that time, we've been involved with working group sessions, I think nearly 40 working group sessions now over the past 5 or 6 years that include not only the regulators, both from BC and from the federal government, but also we've invited in the regulators from Alaska, and we've also included the indigenous people in our working group sessions as well. We've gone through 3 iterations of pre-feasibility studies with the feedback we've received from the First Nations and their consultants. We've made a number of design changes to the project to deal with some of the issues they brought forward, which centered around water management and fish management. And we believe that as a result of these changes, as been shown now with the endorsement we're seeing from the Niska Nation and the Gitxsan, that we do have the support of the First Nations going forward.
Thank you for that. And the next question, John, he's wondering about how you're able to finance the project in this kind of a market, I guess relating to your last financing, in this kind of gold and copper market, in the way that we've seen a lot of these mining companies having difficulty getting access to capital. How is Seabridge able to successfully finance right now and not dilute your share structure?
Well, we've been at this now for almost 15 years, and I think if you look at our history in terms of managing our share count while making sure we have enough capital to advance the project, we've done a pretty good job. Matter of fact, our ounces have grown 6 or 7 times faster than our shares outstanding over the past 14 years. In this environment, it's definitely very difficult. However, we have a long-standing shareholder base that has supported us for more than a decade now. We continue to be able to go out and raise money when we need to raise money that we believe would put to good use to continue to increase our ounces of gold on a per-share basis. Also in Canada, recognizing how important the mining industry is to the overall Canadian economy, there's a tax structure available to investors that allows us to go out and raise what are known as flow-through funds at a 20 to a 30% premium to our share price without having to attach a warrant to it. We've now done this successfully for the past 3 years, bringing in probably over $50 million of capital over the last several years through that tax-driven structure. And then on top of that, in the early years of Seabridge, something I didn't touch on, this is not the only project we have. From 1999 to 2002, when we were in acquisition mode, we acquired a number of projects, in fact 9 separate deposits. We've now been focusing on KSM and our second project, Courageous Lake, and we've used the smaller assets we acquired over those years to help fund the development of the big assets. Here to date, we've now received over $50 million of sales proceeds from non-core asset sales, and if you look at what we still have under option on some of our earlier stage smaller projects, we'll be receiving another close to $50 million in sales proceeds as they continue to move forward on their option structures. So managing our share count while making sure we have enough cash on hand is something that we take very seriously, and I think if you look at our track record, we've done a pretty good job at that.
Absolutely. It's unusual to see such a well-maintained share structure, and I think a key item to that is that management is heavily invested, so you're aligned with shareholders' interest. Our next question, Robert, I think it's kind of just answered here about the gold market compared to late 90s and the opportunities that were created by that. He's wondering if there's other opportunities outside of KSM right now, but with such a massive gold project, it doesn't seem like that needs to, you need to be focusing elsewhere. Or are you looking at potential other deals? But I guess right now you've just mentioned all these other projects in your portfolio that you are doing, able to do deals with right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at the environment today, it's very similar in terms of valuations than what we saw in the late 90s and early 2000s when the gold price was much lower than it is today. We continue to look at acquisition opportunities. What I will tell you, though, is finding something that will be accretive to us and meaningful is difficult when you look at what we have as an asset base today. I'd also be reluctant to use our shares on anything that wasn't accretive to us right now. I do believe, though, that as we go forward and start to unlock value by getting the project approved through the environmental assessment process and bringing a joint venture partner in, and if our share price goes to the level that we think it can go to, we can then start looking at acquisition opportunities again, if they exist as they still do today.
Well, to wrap it up here, a couple more comments. In 6 months from now, when we do a follow-up on Seabridge Gold, what would be the milestones? And you've mentioned the environmental process, the permits, the drill season starting back up. What would be the major milestones in a successful next several months for Seabridge Gold look like?
Well, the environmental assessment process obviously is key. We focused a lot of resources for that and expect to have that done July, then followed up shortly by the federal approval. Drilling is also very important to us. We believe that Deep Kerr can be extended quite a bit. We believe that if you just look at the geometry of the deposit we have there now, that this thing could yield a resource in excess of 1 billion tons. It's open in all directions still. And then on top of that, we think there's other opportunities underneath perhaps our iron cap deposit and other existing near-surface deposits that we have as reserves to find additional higher-grade deposits. And then I think the most important thing going forward will be our ability to bring in a partner that can build this mine and minimize our capital exposure in any joint venture participation.
Fantastic. Well, we really appreciate your time today giving us an update. If investors or listeners would like to find more information, how can they find more information on Seabridge Gold?
Well, probably the best way is to go to our website at www.seabridgegold.net. It is a well laid out website. It also provides the opportunity for shareholders to ask direct questions, which either come to me or our president, and we do respond very quickly with questions that come through our website. But there's a lot of useful information on our website. The other thing I would point you towards is last week we filed our annual report to shareholders, which not only reviews what we accomplished in 2013, but also clearly sets out the objectives that we have for this year, which I think if we achieve these objectives, we will see a significant move in our share price.
Fantastic. And as a final parting comment here, I would like to share my report on Seabridge Gold. I had the opportunity to fly up from Vancouver, a very easy flight up and drive up to the project. In the chat window, you can click on that link and get my perspectives on Seabridge Gold. Rudi, thank you very much for your time today, and all the best and success in the coming up drill season, and we look forward to the update in several months.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'd like to go ahead and move over to the question and answer period with Jim Willie. If everyone could stand by for about 30 seconds as we switch over. Okay, Jim, Willie, are you able to hear us?
I'm here.
Fantastic.
I can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. Jim Willie happens to be one of our most popular, if not our most popular author on GoldSeek.com. So those of you listening to today's webinar are most familiar with his work. He's been contributing to GoldSeek.com for many years and has a lot of different insights, not just on gold, but on a lot of global financial and economic perspectives. We have quite a few questions coming in for you, so we're going to try to shoot through these one at a time here. There are questions coming in also through the webinar here, so we'll try to get through as many as possible. But again, we thank you all for the questions. There's quite a few here. So let's kick off with just to get a general view of the current gold market here. Jim, what is your take on the gold price right now? Have we seen a bottom, and is this gold market ready to turn, and where are we in this gold bull market right now?
I'm sorry, but I don't really align myself in the same way that a lot of other people do. I don't look at the gold price very often. I know that sounds really strange, but it's a corrupted gold price. They don't have much inventory. They raid the GLD. They engage in price fixing. They've got all kinds of derivatives and corruption. Honestly, I don't watch it very much, and I don't mean to be an idiot or a bastard about it, but I follow what is going to change the gold market. I couldn't even tell you within $50 what the gold price is right now.
Fair enough.
That's not what you expected to hear, but it is my reality, and I follow the very many assorted factors that are going to cause tremendous disruption to the gold market, to the currency market, to the banking systems, and everything. These are called paradigm changes. They're nonlinear, and I don't expect the gold price is going to be a few dollars different from the previous night. I think it's going to be unlisted before long. I don't have a time schedule here, but there's going to be a period of time where you don't have a gold price, and a lot of innovative people are going to tell you that in 7 major gold centers in the world, not counting New York and London, here's the average price. It's going to be kind of like a LIBOR average for the gold price. But these corrupt people running LBMA in London and COMEX in New York with affiliates in Chicago, they're going to be run out of town.
Well, that's it's interesting to hear that perspective, and I think there's a lot of people who agree. They're not very these daily gold price movements is more of the speculators playing in a paper gold market, but not the true gold price. Okay, we've got.
I try to focus, Peter, on all the different factors that are going to cause tremendous change, and that's where my expertise lies.
Okay, fair enough. We'll kick it off here with Cynthia's question. Jim, hi Jim. How do you think South America will be affected in the coming years of upheaval, specifically Ecuador, which uses the U.S. dollar at the moment?
Well, I think that we've got some movements afoot. I've heard from 3 different independent sources that the northern part of South America, in addition to Panama, which is at the handle of that northern rim, Panama's in Central America, but they border Colombia. They also have a very close relationship with Venezuela. All right, here's what I have heard, that Panama has a new stage 3 gold repository. My first impression was, oh gee, this is going to be great. This is the Panama government building up their gold reserves. I was not correct. It was an independent gold repository to be used specifically for European clients, private bullion bank clients who wanted to get away from the Swiss corrupted bullion bank system. They wanted to have a safe allocated account that was out of touch, out of reach from the corrupt Swiss bankers. All right, so now I've come to learn that that depository is probably going to overlap with a government function. Then I got another contact tell me that Panama owns something like 2,500 tons of gold. Now you got to keep this in perspective because that's a tremendous amount of gold. If you bear in mind that they have a 3 million or 3.5 million population, multiply it by 100, and on a per capita basis, Panama has around 4 times as much gold per capita that compared to Fort Knox when it actually had any. So Panama has a tremendous amount of gold per capita compared to the size of their tiny economy, and I consider it the Switzerland of Latin America. I've been through there a dozen times on trips. We have to go every 90 days to get out of the country. It's like a perennial tourist visa. But what I've heard is that they've got this tremendous amount of gold per capita, but they've also got 50 million pounds of copper plates, and they were planning to work closely with Venezuela for a crude oil component in a general resource basket to back up what they have now dubbed as a name, the Central American dollar. And I thought it was going to be called the Panama Balboa revisited, you know, the return of the Balboa, but no, they got a plan for the Central American dollar. Now, Ecuador has put its weight behind that. Now, some people are aware, including the questioner, that Ecuador is a dollar-based economy, dollar-based banking system. So Ecuador needs to do something, and they smell problems, and they know what's coming. Just like Hong Kong, they know what's coming. They're tightly pegged to the dollar, too. All these countries with a dollar usage or a tight dollar peg are making plans right now, right here, right now. So I'm expecting that not the central region of Latin America, you know, South America. Brazil's not in this, so they've got a different plan, and we'll just keep the BRICS out of this answer for now. But we're not going to see Venezuela join this so readily. I think it's going to be Panama and Ecuador at the very least, with an invitation to other nations, and then you get into all kinds of problems like the Bush family presence in Peru, the Bush family presence in Colombia. I don't want to get into all that. I will say, though, that the Central American dollar is on course, and so far Panama and Ecuador are committed to it from what I'm hearing, and Venezuela with its chaos is on the sidelines.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question from Walter Hunt. He's wondering, Jim, why is the process of letting a handful of banks set the daily gold and silver spot prices allowed to continue? He says the opportunity for price manipulation is wide open and probably occurs on a regular basis. There has to be a more accurate price-setting process that is based on the metal's physical supply and demand, not the arbitrary whims of corrupt banks, and they have no obligation to document their price-setting decisions.
Well, this goes back to the question that's been going on now for 20 years or more, really since 1971 with the breaking of the Bretton Woods Gold Accord. By the way, we're going to go back. We're going to have another Bretton Woods. It's going to be just full of intrigue and maybe some violence. But the answer to your question is the evil, corrupt forces control the governments. They control the regulators. They control the central banks. They control, apparently, more of the military and news networks than we want to admit. They basically control the power centers. So they don't have to abide by the rule of law, so they will continue to enrich themselves and play their games. It's the way it is, and the more they exert their control in this manner with false gold pricing, even though they have largely absent inventory supply, the more they exert their influence, the more the Eastern Hemisphere is going to bring about an alternative, which they've been working on for over 3 years. It's not like in the last 6 months they've begun hastily responding. No, they started from what I heard, they started at a very serious conference Easter weekend in 2010. It took place in Abu Dhabi, and I know someone who was in attendance. So, you know, it's unfortunately, but, you know, it's a preachy answer, but we've got corrupt systems, and I look forward to the day when the COMEX goes dark, when they eliminate their gold futures contracting, because they're all fraudulent. They're not delivering gold, they're delivering cash equivalent from their suppressed price. So it's not a contract, it's a joke. So I'm looking forward to a dark period, and I think we're going to see something like 30 to 90 days of darkness on the gold price, and then a new price emerges. It's a vague answer, I'm sorry for it, but what can you say? Someone's coming in on a white horse from the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and they're going to just wipe out JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and Bank of America and Morgan Stanley. They're just going to wipe them out. No, that's silly. They're in power. Their banks are not being liquidated. That is the first requirement for reform toward a true remedy. I said back in 2009, these big banks will not be liquidated. Their power structure will remain in place until the entire Western system breaks. And now it's breaking with confirmation on you know, the fake taper talk, the failed taper talk. We have QE to infinity, an absolute obscenity for heresy. If you had a panel discussion in front of Alan Greenspan in the mid-1990s and asked him, Mr. Greenspan, soon to be Sir Alan Greenspan, could you tell us, will there be a day in the next 10 years when the Federal Reserve will print money and cover 80% of the U.S. government debt and be engaged with quantitative easing and bond purchasing on the monetary unsterilized basis? He would have laughed at you and said, of course not, you can't do that. That's what we have. It's going to break. It is breaking.
Well, talking about, you know, follow-up to the COMEX in China, Ralph is wondering, his question is, why can't China just come into the COMEX and come with a large order, say 5 or 6 ton long demand for gold over an actual physical gold, ask for delivery of the physical gold over paper payment? He's wondering, would this not be enough to break the paper COMEX gold market?
Well, yeah, but they don't share your particular motive or time schedule. Mm-hmm. They have a different set of priorities. They work with a slower time schedule. They work in terms of 10, 15 years. We think in terms of 10 or 15 weeks. The mindset in Asia is totally different. What the Chinese apparently are doing is trying to keep the U.S. economy and the U.S. financial system upright so they can pick its pocket clean. They're trying to keep Uncle Sam walking so they can drain him of all of his gold. They're trying to keep the nation limping along so they can purchase with their treasury bonds as much commercial property as they can. Why would they want to do a 5 or 6 ton overnight and demand delivery and shut the system down when there's hundreds more tons to take? No, what they're going to do is continue the conversion of treasury bonds to gold bullion at their pace. And I believe this sincerely. I'm not joking. I believe they hired JP Morgan several months ago to help keep the price down and to keep the delivery of gold brisk and rapid from New York and London to points east like in Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. What I'm saying is that the New York and London bankers have been hired by China to facilitate the drainage of gold. They're not in any big hurry. And you should fear the day when they run out of gold to supply China, because that's when China will pull the plug. And when they pull the plug, you're going to have tremendous problems in the United States for price increases, import price craziness, probably the launch of a new dollar. I call it the Scheisse dollar, or in private circles, the shit dollar, and also extreme problems with the supply chain. massive shortages. Violence at the ATM cash centers, violence at the gas stations, violence at the supermarkets where there will be some food but a lot of empty shelves. Now, fear the day when the Chinese are frustrated to do what you're suggesting.
Martin Chan would like to know about the safety of holding gold, and is it safe to hold gold in safety deposit boxes even outside of the United States? Or what's the safest way to hold your gold?
I think the safest places to put your gold and silver bars, even big boxes of coins, is in bullion banks, in officially secured, insured bullion banks in countries that don't speak English. Well, countries outside of Switzerland and outside of Britain, outside the U.S., outside Canada. It's sad, but what we've got is the U.S., the British, and parts of Central Europe forming the axis of fascism in a complete 180-degree flip compared to 1945. It's sad. It's reality, though, and I don't give a hoot about flag wavers and veterans and people with a lot of experience from back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. This is not the same world anymore. The center of fascism is the United States and England. They do not have respect for your bank accounts. There have already been numerous examples of the CIA and Homeland Security raiding and taking. You could call it stealing, except that it's legal under the Patriot Act, vacating bank boxes of their coins. You cannot, by law, I call the Patriot Law the Gestapo Manifesto. Okay, that shredded the Constitution. I don't know why the U.S. Supreme Court cites the Constitution. They should either uphold the Patriot Act or uphold the Constitution, not both. The Patriot Act allows any confiscation by U.S. government agencies and authorities of any metal, which means jewelry, coins, bars, as opposed to documents and paperwork, in your bank boxes. So don't put your coins there. Fifth Third Bank of Cincinnati is one example that comes to mind. It was about a year ago, and it was fully legal. They told the bank officials, get the hell out of our way. We've got a job to do. So they raided a few bank boxes, cleaned out the coins. They wanted to make their point. All right, so it's not safe anywhere in the United States to have a bank box. And I don't really recommend burying it in your backyard. I know a funny story. This is a true story. A guy I know, no names. He owns some property in the U.S. South, and he's going through a divorce. And he told me, I'm working hard to get the gold off the property. I buried it there 12 years ago, and I don't want my wife to notice, my soon-to-be ex-wife, to notice that I'm unburying it. So, you get all kinds of problems when you bury on your property. Can you really be assured that nobody's watching you? If someone's watching you, then they know what you're doing. I mean, I know this drug dealer in Pennsylvania, and he says we use 3 armed guards, and we bury our gold coins from ill-gotten cocaine sales, and they do it in the middle of the night. I said, well, you have lights on, don't you? And he said, yeah, but it's in the hills. You don't know who's watching. This is just not smart. The best thing to do is to have a legitimate, insured, secure gold vault in somewhere like Hong Kong. I mean, I hear Singapore is good, but they will share information. Hong Kong, they're just a tight ship. Don't put your gold in Canada. Remember, Canada vacated their entire gold reserves to aid Wall Street in the fiat currency regime. You still want to trust a country for its officials and their bank regulators when they played cooperatively with Wall Street? I don't. I mean, the notion that Canada is different from the United States in terms of legitimacy and absent corruption and honest markets. That's just total joke to me.
So really, one of the key points there is do not hold anything within a financial institution. Keep your outside of certain geographical locations. You need to have your gold held outside of the banking system.
Yes, outside the paper, the banking system from the paper currency forex regime. Don't put it in a bank box. Don't have it, anything to do with a U.S. or Western bank. You don't want to be in that system. You don't want to have them with the capability of rehypothecating, because sadly, in the U.S. financial system, any deposit is instantly converted into a loan to the financial firm and no longer is your asset. You need to read the 2005 bankruptcy laws. The first aspect had to do with bankruptcy regarding Chapter 7 and 13 and wiping debts clean and restructuring your debt and all that. That's all fine, but there was another side, the corporate side, and it dictated that all big bank deposits, or any bank deposits, were transformed into loans to the bank, and you are a creditor, and if it fails, you lose your money. There's no such thing as a sacred bank account in the U.S. It's a fascist system. Unbelievable what's happening, Peter. Unbelievable. And what I find most alarming is that 80% of the Americans I talk to don't have a clue about what's going on with the savings and account structure and financial firms. No idea.
And the education will come at a time when it's too late to make any sort of protective measures. So, when we see here's a question regarding capital controls. Is this something that will happen overnight, in your opinion? Is this you wake up one morning and you're not able to get any assets or money out of the country?
Well, the capital controls started 3 years ago. They're not 100% tight. There are limitations on it's most of the big banks, the big New York City and like Wells Fargo, the big money center banks, Wachovia included. And some of the second-tier banks are beginning to show these same restrictions. I know some people who tell me, no, I have a bank account in Texas, and I have no problem moving moving $175,000 to Costa Rica. But I hear other clients tell me, well, I'm limited by a monthly amount of how much I can wire out of my account, and it's with a big money center bank out of New York. So there are capital controls. They're just not totally strict. But what they try to do is impose a capital control, put on a light pressure on that channel, and then gradually increase the channel so that 3 years from now you have much tighter restrictions, but people don't notice. The whole purpose is to get the Americans not to notice. And that's why we are disliked so much by the powers, because we educate the masses.
Mm-hmm. And I notice in other countries, and I hear this a lot from readers at GoldSeek, saying they've tried to open up an account. Even in Canada, they don't want to open up accounts for Americans. There's too much risk. There's too much legal and other reasons they don't want to mess with that. It's too expensive, the regulatory thing. So it's a form of capital controls, like you say. They're instituting, making it more difficult on other areas to do that. Okay, the next question here from Chips R. He's wondering, how will the U.S. government respond when the BRICS announce acceptance for an alternative currency? How will they respond? Will it be a quick response? Will it result in war, revolt? So how big of a threat is the BRICS to the United States dollar?
Well, the BRICS are part of, they seem to be the working team for the G20, which is led largely by Russia and China. You can talk about the BRICS, you can talk about G20, you can talk about the Shanghai Co-op organization. But when the dust clears, what you really have is the BRICS nations with a growing army behind them. The BRICS are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I once asked, well, why is South Africa in there? And the answer was simple. South Africa has a lot of gold. I mean, we're not talking about a big economy. We're not talking about a big, important currency. It's not a major currency of the world, but they do have an important coin, the Kruger rand. So what is happening now is we're seeing extensions like, well, I hear it called BRICS. You got Indonesia and Iran. So you now have three eyes: India, Indonesia, and Iran. All right, well, it's much more than that. There are probably 20 other nations that have already put their weight behind the BRICS leading nations, and it's Russia and China. But now we're seeing more and more news coming out of India, like a pipeline deal and a supply deal with China for a pipeline, for Russia with pipelines. I'm sorry, probably not China with pipeline. It's a Russian-India deal. And India is involved in eastern Siberia of Russia. Few people know, but India is pretty darn good at offshore drilling. So they're involved with the Okhotsk Sea, the Pacific coast of Russia in Siberia. The Indians are involved, and they're evaluating a bunch of different contracts right now. Leases for making bids on land and sea, plots of sea, and proceeding. So the BRICS are very active, and they're developing a list of nations that are basically saying, whatever you do, we will follow. If you come out with a different trade settlement payment system, we're behind you. If you come out with a new method of paying for energy with credits or bilateral or barter, we're behind you. And from what I'm hearing, they're close to 100 nations behind the BRICS. And my important point when it comes to BRICS and new platforms and new systems and even the ultimate of a gold-backed currency, my important point, I'll give you an example. Let's just suppose China, all alone, comes out with a gold-backed yuan. And it goes up 20% in the first week in value. And it goes up 10% more the next couple weeks. And it goes up another 5%. Before you know it, it's up almost 40%. And only 2 or 3 months have passed. And the Chinese have suddenly priced themselves out of their own export market. All the countries that are not using the yuan that's backed by gold, the new yuan, it would have to have a new name. How about the new yuan? All the nations not on board, not using it, would see a tremendous price increase for anything exported out of China to their countries. You can go on a long list of things that they export. All right, so critical mass is important. Let's suppose, on the other hand, that Russia announces, well, we're going to have a gold-backed ruble at the same time China has a gold-backed yuan. And furthermore, the Arabs, the Gulf Arabs, including Iran, they're not Arab, they're Persian. All the Gulf nations announce, or at least maybe all but one or two. You can't get them all. You never can get all the Arabs to do something. It's not in their genetics. They always have one or two that say, screw you, we're out. So let's suppose then that at the same time Russia and China come out with a gold-backed currency, so does the Gulf dinar. And I got some indication just a few days ago from a client living in Kuwait who was on a plane, and to her left was a Turkish banker, and to her right was an Egyptian economist, and she said, Jim, you would have wanted to be in my seat, because the Turkish banker was talking about frequent trips to the Gulf region, UAE, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the purpose of the frequent trips was a new currency. He said it'll shock the Western system, if not the world. He said what we're working on is revolutionary. He didn't use the word revolutionary. He used it, highly disruptive, great change for everything. All right, the Arabs in the Gulf are already working on something, And let's suppose at the same time Germany the next day comes out and says, well, we, with the Finns, the Dutch, and the Austrians, our closest Central European trade partners, by the way, they're all Protestant, none of them are Catholic. Just take note of that. The pigs are all Catholic. Take note of that. All the Central European nations announce, well, we've got a gold-backed Nordic euro. We're abandoning the standard euro. All right. And then maybe the other, lying in the wings is Norway. And they announce, well, we're going to have an oil-backed krone. And we're not going to do gold. We might do some conversion and work on a basket of gold and oil. But right now we're just going to announce for the launch a oil-backed krone currency. If you get all those 5 at once or within a short period of time, you're going to get all the BRICS nations aligning with it and all their trade zone formulating, and you're going to have a critical mass of probably over 50% of global trade. That's how you do not become a victim of your own successful new currency. I think these nations in the East are waiting, planning, formulating, building their alliances so that they get critical mass. Once they get 50 and 60%, if they're pushed against the wall, they're going to launch their gold-backed currencies, and it's going to cause a total topsy-turvy in the Western banking and financial structures. So that's what I think the BRICS are doing, and you just watch the growing list. It's not just Indonesia and Iran. It's lots and lots of little nations like Vietnam, Korea, a lot of nations, and watch Japan, because Japan is converting 10 times more of their treasury bonds into gold than they are letting on. They're talking about, I think they said something like 23 tons last month converted treasury bond note. Japan converted 10 times that. And they don't want to get attacked. They really don't want another Fukushima.
We have a couple questions regarding the situation in Ukraine. Just kind of consolidate this here. Is this a game changer? Is this going to spill over into something bigger? Is this going to force the timeline, accelerate things between Russia and China? And one thing I want to add to these questions is that today it was announced that the first investment to Crimea has come from China. They're investing in the bridge that connects Russia to Crimea. So obviously there's a lot of things going on there. When I watch the Western media, there's a lot of propaganda saying that the U.S. is not involved. It's all Russia, this, that. But it's quite obvious that this is a game being played, and Russia is making a pretty strong stand here. And so I guess the question from these questions is, will this force Russia to engage more in a financial warfare, and how does this all relate to what's going on?
You saved the toughest question for last, and this is really an 8-sided question. It's not simple at all. Let me just say as a preface that Putin set a trap. What he did was, if you look at the actual Maidan coup d'etat, something happened and suddenly people vacated their offices, police vacated their posts, military vacated their stations, and suddenly there was a vacuum, and in went Maidan with his fascists supported by the Langley dark op troops and the Soros NATO mercenaries. Putin set a trap. He pulled out and created a vacuum and let the U.S. and NATO forces go in. These are not standard issue military. We've got a schism going on right now in the U.S. The Pentagon is not behind this. They're told to be behind it. The Pentagon and Langley are at odds. There are two separate militaries in the United States. One has markings on their uniforms, the standard issue Pentagon, and the other does not. They only have apparently high rank markings on their militaries, and they're you know, up to their necks in heroin. So the CIA has conducted its first full-scale theater of war in Ukraine. Now, why would Putin set a trap? What he wants to do is allow the U.S. and the NATO nations to do what they do best: rape and pillage. Right away, they vacated the central bank. I think it was 23 tons of gold down in the middle of the night by masked men. They didn't even get approval from the airport tower. They were told, get out of the way, shut up. The second thing they did was vacated $70 billion of both government funds and oligarch funds and put them in Switzerland. So arguments that the New York Fed could not return gold to Germany because of logistic reasons were proven false because they did an overnight raid of Ukraine and did it in a matter of hours. So logistics was proven to be quite effective. So Putin wants Eastern European nations to watch closely. Watch the rape of their land with the Halliburton chemicals in hydraulic fracturing for the gas fields, otherwise called fracking. It contaminates the fields. And don't be the least bit surprised if we learn in the next year that in the fracking process where they put the chemicals to loosen the water table and fracture it and release the gas, don't be at all surprised to learn that they're dumping toxic chemicals in there. I mean toxic waste. Because, hey, it's illegal for you to demand what's in the Halliburton formula. So we're thinking now a land repeat of what they did in the Gulf of Mexico. How's that working out? By the way, in Atlanta a few months ago, it was raining crappy white junk. It wasn't snow. It was crappy white junk called Corexit. The dispersant in the Gulf of Mexico now is raining in the southeast United States. Okay, mission accomplished, right? All right, so Putin wants the Eastern European nations to observe what's going on, observe the thefts, observe the mistreatment of the minorities in whatever region, whatever district, whatever province, and watch the Western multinational corporations come in roughshod and do whatever the hell they want, and maybe trample some protesters for the environment. After they observe the rape and pillage, what the U.S. and NATO nations do best, these Eastern nations are going to eagerly join Russia and say, we want to be part of your Eurasian trade zone. I listed 4 nations as swing states: Germany, Turkey, Ukraine, and Saudi Arabia. I think they're all going to flip, and they're all in the process of flipping to turn their allegiance and their following to Russia, China, and the Eastern movements led by the BRIC nations and their army of following nations. I think I read somewhere there are 87 nations that they call BRICS associates now. So Putin's got a plan, and back to the military side. It's like a stupid man is using a sharp stick to poke at a bear's face. And the stupid man is trying to provoke the bear to take a swipe and maybe leave an open wound on his own neck so that he could later say at his own funeral, or his family could, look what that Russian bear did. So it looks to me like the dollar is on a suicide mission. They want to have Russia do the coup de grace, as the French would say, the deadly blow, the mercy blow. Russia must respond. It could be that the Americans think that the Russians and Chinese are not prepared yet. They don't have the critical mass. They don't have the gold-backed currency ready. They don't have its wiring to the commodity markets, whether gold and oil or more, like in Panama with copper. I would love to see a Panama bimetallic standard, gold and copper. That would be tremendous news for Central America. But I don't think Costa Rica would join because they're in the U.S. hip pocket. They're aligned for the U.S. recovery. What recovery is that? There's a lot more going on with Ukraine. I'd like to mention an angle that few people think about or regard in these terms. But the first attack by the U.S. and the West. Just think of the U.S. NATO together. I call them the West. U.S., England, and NATO together is the West. The first attack by the West against Russia was Cyprus. That was March of 2013, I believe, last year. Why was that attack of Russia? What makes me say that? Well, because one of the biggest banks in Cyprus was Gazprom Bank. And they had another bank, Sberbank, and another bank, I think it's VNB. It's 3 letters with a V. I can't remember, I'm sorry. But there were 3 big Russian banks there. Well, what were they doing? Well, to begin with, Russia used Ukraine banking system as their window intermediary for all transactions to the West. So the U.S. was trying to halt central bank and major bank transactions by Russia to the West. It was a bank blockade. And they also tried to interfere with Russian usage of the Ukraine banks for conversion of treasury bonds to gold. All right, that's the first attack against Russia by the West. The second was Syria. And what was the hidden agenda there? They wanted to stop the Iran gas pipeline from its completion across the northeast portion of Iraq into Syria to a Mediterranean port guarded closely by the Tartus Naval Center by the Russian Navy. So the U.S. wanted to interrupt the completion of the Iran pipeline to join Gazprom. And the funny little wrinkle to that whole picture was that Israel already signed up to supply Gazprom with their Tamar floating platform, which is I hear, an engineering marvel. It's floating, it's not fixed, it's not attached with legs to the bed. The Israelis are going to have a tremendous surplus of gas and have a nice big check paid by Gazprom. So watch Israel become an interesting little piece in the middle between the U.S. and Russia, because Israel is going to flip. I'm not going to call them a major swing state because they're just not big enough. And besides, I don't like writing or talking about Israel because they had associations, let's say, with my death threat. There's a lot more going on with battles between the West and Russia. Ukraine is the latest. You could say, oh, they just want to interfere with the pipelines. It's a lot more than that. What they want to do is establish a major gas production region out of Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, and Poland, and have the region self-sufficient. It's a stupid plan because, like in the United States, it has 2 huge problems. One is that it only lasts for a couple of years. Any student of gas fracking would understand and conclude quickly that it's a 2-year project. You get depleted wells. It's tremendously rapid depletion. In my own home area where I grew up in Pittsburgh, I think there's a company called Medallion. I'm not certain of the name, but anyway, it's a large fracking gas company. And they started in 2011 and 12 in western Pennsylvania. And they produced a lot of gas. Well, they're pulling out. It's 2 years later. They're done. They're done. So that's the first risk, quick depletion for Eastern European region. The second problem is when you're done, you've got contaminated water systems. Well, gee, that's not a long-term solution. That's barely even a short-term solution. Now, this whole Ukraine thing is an absolute mess, and the biggest challenge for Russia under Putin's leadership is to maintain kind of a standoff. Okay, there'll be skirmishes, and there'll be strafings, and there'll be killings, and there'll be raids, and whatever. There'll be kidnappings. But maintain control where this does not get out of control. No conflagration. Do not allow the Ukraine battles to become a regional war that spreads to, say, Poland. There's a lot of reason why Putin might attack Poland, because that's where the training center was for the U.S. and NATO mercenaries. Unbelievable stuff going on. So, Putin must keep this a standoff because the military, he's got some military cards. I don't want to get into advantages, but you know, they got jamming radar systems. They've got supersonic missiles like the Sunburn and Onyx. The U.S. would not win a quick war unless they did this huge, deadly first strike nuke. I mean, this is what apparently the U.S. strategy is working toward, a first deadly, powerful nuke strike. I mean, I don't like talking this way, but it looks like it's what they're trying to do. They want to take control of Russian lands after a strike. I mean, this is crazy. No, what Putin needs to do is to keep this thing at a neutral basis, and that's why he does the demos to show off the superiority in key targeted areas, because once the standoff comes militarily, then the battle goes financial and economic. And my joke about, it's hardly a joke, but my little saying regarding Ukraine is Putin's going to try to delay and delay and delay until Ukraine sinks from its own insolvency, corruption, and pathetic conditions.
Just a follow-up question. We got Peter from Sydney, Australia, where it's early 3 a.m. He's wondering what do you think about Mr. Putin? Is I guess it's kind of open-ended question there, but
well, okay, just some general impressions. I don't think the American, the U.S. leaders, and you know, for that matter, Merkel and the French leader, British leaders, I don't think they're very good strategists. They don't realize their own vulnerabilities very, very well. I mean, the Syrian, the support by the British to the U.S. in Syria evaporated as soon as the Kremlin made a phone call reminding Britain of their, 25% dependence on Russian gas. So, British, you want cold winter homes, or are you going to back off? So they backed off. No, I have a chart. Can I try to produce a chart?
yes, let me go ahead and switch this over.
Okay, show my screen. I clicked. All right, good. I've got this chart showing is the M1 multiplier. Notice that the money velocity is going down, 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 down. That's pretty bad. And let me show as a contrast to that another chart, monetary base. It's a great chart to show in contrast to that. All right, there's the velocity of money. I'm sorry. There's the supply of money. Oh, I can't make it bigger. All right. So you've got money supply going way up and money velocity going way down. That means you're breaking. The whole system is breaking. All right. I didn't want to show those charts, but that was on my screen at the time. I'm glad to show those two charts in contrast. They were the basis of a recent public article, and I say chart 1 plus chart 2 equals systemic failure. All right, but let's get to the Russian energy percentage. 04 Russian. All right, here goes. I'm going to look it up. 04 Russian energy PCT. Okay, there's the Russian energy situation. All right. On the left is the Russian oil, and I've got it in a green circle. Can you see, Peter, the green circle of Germany?
Yes, it's coming through well.
Okay, good. All right, what that means is that on the horizontal scale, it's the percentage of Russian oil exports above my arrow. So Germany takes in about 10% of Russia's oil exports. Pardon me. On the vertical scale, you see over here, I don't know if you can notice my movement, that around 30% of German oil usage comes from Russia. Wow. And notice that the stupid one in the group, Poland, 85% of their oil comes from Russia. And Poland, on the other chart, almost 100% of their gas comes from Russia. So what's Poland doing? Offering training grounds for the NATO troops, the mercenaries. Just really stupid stuff. Now, for Germany, on the gas chart to your right, you see that it's about, I don't know exactly, 16 or 17% of all the Russian gas that's exported goes to Germany. And on the vertical scale, you see about 40, 42% of all the German gas that's used comes from Russia. So with 30% dependence in oil for Germany and 40% gas dependence for Germany related to Russian energy, you think Germany's going to flip soon and say, we're going to start supporting you, Mr. Putin? I do. I do very much. And now couple that with the Saudis who put on a parade newly purchased Chinese missiles with full billboards. These are from China, our new friend China. You're seeing the death of the petrodollar. I have a lot of respect for Putin. I have a joke with the Voice. I say, someday I'd like to meet him. And he said to me, Jim, I assure you that he has read the Russian translation of some of your work. And I go, yeah, really? He said, yeah, probably. Don't worry about it. Anyway, Putin is a master chess player. I think what he did with Ukraine, for those who know chess, is he pulled off a delayed check. He moved a piece, putting the U.S. in check. But what the U.S. is about to realize is that their queen is now at risk of being captured because of the delayed check move, not Czechoslovakia. The delayed check by the Russians moved a piece and now have exposed the Western Queen. And I think the Western Queen is in the form of the Eurasian trade zone. The delayed move, it's going to happen in the next few months. I believe Ukraine is going to fall a lot faster than Egypt did. We've got all these different examples, but few people seem to want to take a look. In Egypt, you had the puppet named Morsi move in and become leader of Egypt, and within 12 months he was gone. I don't think 12 months are going to pass for this Maidan, the fascist, put in by the U.S. and NATO forces. By the way, George Soros, a.k.a. Georgi Schwartz, that's his real birth name. Soros, a.k.a. Schwartz, is a big contributor for the funds and the costs behind the movement to take control in Kiev, Ukraine. This is a nasty, nasty situation, and I think Putin is pretty darn smart. To begin with, he's got a lot of cards. He's got a lot of pieces on the chessboard. I don't think the U.S. has much more than a queen and a couple of, maybe a rook and a knight and a bishop. They're missing a lot of pieces, and they don't really want to admit it. Instead, what they do is they engage in tremendous propaganda. I have got a friend, I don't want to give names, but he owns property in Panama. He's from California, and he goes through Costa Rica frequently. He has friends here, including me. And he said to me about a month ago or 2 months ago, he said, Jim, I don't understand. Why did Russia do what they did? Why are they so aggressive and moving in on Ukraine? And I say, have you been watching the news in California? And he said, well, yeah, it's all over the news. I said, well, you need to stop watching the news because it's not the news. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, gosh, did you know that the NATO mercenaries and Langley mercenaries took control and came in and did the coup d'etat to install a fascist leader, their boy? Did you know that the central bank leader is from the Mossad in Israel? He said, no, I didn't know that. So why do you think then that Russia responded by capturing the naval port in Crimea? It's their Chesapeake. And he said, oh, I get it. Oh, you know, 90% of Americans, I don't think, get it. And it's pathetic. Turn off the news. Start reading online. I've got a saying that I really think is true. 80% of the mainstream news is a lie, and 20% of the internet news, the online news, 20% is, say, an exaggeration or some fantastic silly story. But 80% of online is true, 80% of mainstream is false.
Well, I agree with you fully. The amount of propaganda that you see on mainstream media is it's amazing, and how many people want to believe and trust in it. It's the resources are out there for anyone to get the information and educate themselves, and it's all at tip of the at your fingertips here. Let me move on.
Can I add one more thing regarding Ukraine?
Absolutely.
This is really interesting. Exxon is the old Standard Oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exxon is the old Standard Oil, the old Esso. Exxon is a Rockefeller entity. Notice the continued deals and projects by Exxon with Russia. I'm talking about the Crimean offshore, I mean, you know, the water-based projects. I'm talking about the Eastern Siberia projects with Exxon and Russia. And I'm talking about the Arctic projects with Exxon and Russia. Why is it that Exxon is not honoring the sanctions? Very good answer.
Yeah.
The answer is the conundrum. I believe Putin has masterfully used the Rockefeller piece on the chessboard. The Rockefellers are siding with Russia, which means Kissinger, which means the Rockefeller grandson, Clinton. He's the grandson, illegitimate grandson. Clinton is the grandson of John David Rockefeller. Okay, so Putin has masterfully used the Rockefeller Exxon group to separate from the Rothschild Western banker group. And now you've got a pincer movement where the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are now not on the same side. So who's the master chess player?
All right. Well, let's move back to Central America and Mexico. We've got a question coming in from Professor Marvell. He's wondering, he believes that the largest number of expats live in Mexico, and I was wondering about how safe it is to hold wealth in Mexican pesos or in a Mexican bank or brokerage account. He says we're familiar with the tequila crisis of 1994, where the Mexican peso was devalued by 50%. And he says his understanding is that the Mexican government has had a much more conservative fiscal policy, and in some ways the peso is more stable than the dollar. So he's wondering, if the dollar is devalued, will the peso follow? And another question about if, as in the United States, are Americans living in Mexico safer holding libertats and be out of pesos and dollars altogether?
Well, I don't think Americans, we call them gringos here, I don't think gringos in Mexico are safe at all. The number of kidnappings in Acapulco is astonishing. They might be safe in Cabo San Lucas, kind of a sanctuary, but if I were an American, a gringo living in Mexico, I'd be worried sick. The Zeta cartel, drug cartel, they're very active. And I don't want to get into a discussion regarding them, only to say that the kidnappings are accelerating to the point that there are almost no Americans living in Acapulco anymore. So when somebody tells me that there are a lot of expats living in Mexico, my reply is there are a lot of expats who used to live in Mexico, and they got out with their necks intact. I don't know about bail-ins or confiscations in Mexican banks, but with all the cooperation between the Langley narco boys and the old, oh gosh, what was his name? I can't think of the old leader of Mexico.
Salinas?
No, it's after that. Oh shoot, there's a hospital named after the same name. Anyway, back in 10 years ago and 8 years ago, there was a lot of cooperation in what they call drug interdiction between the U.S. government and the Mexican government. Anytime you hear about drug interdiction, what you really need to do is translate that. It means that there was cooperation to eliminate their mutual competitors. So
That
There's
must.
a lot of cooperation with their narco treatment, and I think there's a lot of cooperation with their banks. If the U.S. does a bail-in, I think the Mexicans will too. When the Mexicans had their 1995 restructure and reform of their currency, all the bank loans had their balances adjusted upward. So, I mean, if you had a $10,000 car loan that you just put on a year ago, well, suddenly it's $13,000, and you've got new money now for income. This is what I think is going to happen in the U.S. and Mexico. Mexico's already provided the precedent for that. On the other hand, let me put the bright side to the picture. Hugo Salinas Price is a longtime Hat Trick Letter subscriber. He's also one of the architects and movement leaders for the reinstallation of silver standard to the Mexican peso. And, you know, I wish him a lot of luck. I think it's a real tough uphill struggle, but it's possible that Mexico might break ranks and cause some tremendous problems with the United States. If remember the long list of gold-backed currencies regarding the critical mass, the ruble, the yuan, the Gulf dinar, the Nordic euro, the Norwegian krone, if they all come to pass, then we might see the Mexicans say, hey, if they're going to do it, we're going to do a silver-backed Mexican peso, because we got lots of silver, and we can build up our reserves real fast. And guess what? Presto, Mexico's going to be stabilized. But I wouldn't want to have my money sitting in a Mexican bank. I wouldn't want to have my money sitting in Mexican Libertads in a box where some guys can come in the middle of the night with machine guns and masked faces. And you don't know whether they're from Langley or the Mexican Zeta cartel or even the Mexican government. And by the way, what's the difference between the Mexican government and a drug cartel? I don't know. I don't want to have someone break into my home and steal what I have. That's why I say have your gold and silver bars and coins stored outside Switzerland and outside any country that speaks English. That includes Australia. The Perth men, I mean, I hear lots of weird stories about how they're dirty. They're not honoring their account holders. They're not redeeming with gold. They're doing the same old crap that the Swiss have done, redeeming, and New York is doing now, in redeeming contracts and accounts in cash. So, you know, we may see some interesting developments full of intrigue out of Mexico, but I'm not going to hold my breath. It may happen. I'm not going to count on it. And I don't think the expats in Mexico are all that comfortable. I know one who escaped from Costa Rican police authorities here, and he's hiding in Mexico. I don't think he's going to live much longer.
Isn't it true, too, that the central bank in the mid-'90s, when I think the Fed provided a bailout during the crisis, one of the conditions was the central bank was privatized?
I'm not sure. I'm not really familiar with that era. I had my own issues at that time. I was trying to save my job. But I haven't read much about that. I don't honestly know.
Okay. All right. Well, we got to wrap up things here pretty soon, so we want to take the last couple questions. And we've got a question from Vanessa is wondering on the future of QE. How is this going to play out with their money printing? And as you mentioned in the beginning, there seems to be more about talk than it is about action on tapering. So are they going to be forced to actually increase the amount of money printing here in the near future, or what's going on there?
Well, they already are. They're just lying better. Mm-hmm. Let me bring up another chart. This is almost hilarious. It's the Belgian U.S. Treasury bonds. All right, Belgian 04. This is a beautiful chart. Now, remember, Belgium is a small country with a deficit every year. They have no trade surplus in which to convert to gold or treasury bonds or anything for that matter. They're actually a country that 2 years ago had no budget at all. They were so disorganized. So how on earth in the last 6 months have they gone from 170, 180 billion up to 340 billion in treasury bond holdings at their central bank? They're what I call the hidey hole for the Euro Central Bank, doing proxy work for the Fed. So the Fed says, hey, Draghi, go buy another 20 billion because we're going to lie to the American public that we're decreasing our bond purchases. And by the way, these are all unsterilized. They're printing money to buy bonds. It's the absolute heresy of central banking. So what's the fate of QE? Let me remind people of my forecast in 2012 when QE was well along. I said QE will be followed by QE2, followed by QE3, followed by QE4. QE to infinity will be the rule. Of course, I got emails telling me how stupid I am, which I kind of enjoy because they're funny. They're funny. They're from dumb people. They're not very good students of history or anything for that matter. They're good at abuse and probably drinking a lot. So I got some hate mail, and it's okay. I don't care. But notice that the taper talk was proved to be a trial balloon that failed. And what they did was they said, no, we're going to assure the financial markets. QE will continue. And now they're trying to lie a lot when they rely on Japan, Belgium, and the interest rate swap derivative. So I expect that the consequence of their actions is going to be a continuation and acceleration of what's been happening for the last year and a half, and that is a gradual rise in the cost structure and a gradual disappearance of the profit structure, the profit margins, and a gradual shutdown of equipment and capital and building structures. In other words, a gradual capital destruction that destroys the economy. Now, you hear stories about the U.S. recovery. What you're seeing now is they're lying about price inflation, and whatever percent they lie on price inflation is their lie on economic growth. They're calling growth, they're calling price inflation growth. They don't properly identify price inflation, and they're calling this hidden price inflation their growth. It's not growth. We've got something like a -2% economic recession that's firmly in place and has been for quite a while, for 5 years. -2, -3, -4%. So take a case in point of Egypt. A year ago, they disposed of Mohammed Morsi, the U.S. puppet. The U.S. press and the Western press said that the Egyptians wanted more rights, wanted more religious reforms, wanted some of their opposing political leaders to be released from prison, and a whole lot of other stories. What they left out was the most important. A 60% increase in the price of food. Most revolutions come as a result of rising food prices gone out of control. The same thing's going to happen in the United States. The same thing is happening now in Venezuela. They're getting a payback from all the Chavez years of controlling and keeping down, keeping propped rather, keeping a stable Bolivar currency value. So what's going to happen is a continuation of QE and a lot of hidden volume for their monetization. If I had to come up with a rough estimate, I'd say they're monetizing somewhere between $100 and $150 billion a month. And most of that is with derivatives. So you take a look at the progression in Belgium that's still staring at you on the screen. That was up $30 billion in 1 month. Now, Janet Yellen, who is a liar, I'd love to know what deal they struck with her to make her agree to become a, captain of the Titanic. The deal had to be different from the one given to Benjamin Shalom Bernanke. My guess is that when she says we're reducing by $10 billion a month from what? 70 or 50, or who can keep track what these liars are doing behind the scenes? So maybe she's got this mark on the wall of 50 billion a month, so they're going to reduce it by 10 billion a month. Well, gee, Belgium increased by 30. So the liar is saying we're going down by 10, but their main proxy in Belgium is up by 30. How much is the Bank of England increasing by? I don't believe that the figures on the TIC report are true. They've already let us know a year ago, 8 months ago, that there's a delay in the reporting on the TIC report of foreign central bank treasury holdings, and we can't be assured of their accuracy. In other words, we lie with it too, like we lie with everything.
Well, Jim, we really appreciate your insights. We've got tons of questions still coming in, but unfortunately our time is up for today. For those interested in following more your work, we post your public articles on GoldSeek.com. You've got a new one coming later today, as I understand. And if you could share with our listeners where they could find more information about your newsletter and how they may, if they're interested in subscribing, where they should go.
Well, here's the new article I'm working on today, Swing States and Event Schedule. I feature those same countries, Germany, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. They're swing states. They're going to be turning. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of how many phone calls Putin's going to make and when he makes the phone calls. But the website is goldenjackass.com. And I just had my 10th anniversary, Peter, and you guys are part of my little success story. I've been posting articles with you folks for, I think, at least 6 years, and it's got over 2,500 subscribers. April was a 10-year anniversary. So goldenjackass.com is the website. It has a free public page. Doesn't cost anything to take a look at it. That's where I post, there's a button for it, and that's where I post public articles like this Swing States and Event Schedule. It's going to come up. I hope to have it done today, if not then early tomorrow. I worked on it early today when I get up. I get up very early. I get up at 5:30, 6:30. I can't sleep much. I haven't been able to sleep, honestly, since Lehman fell. So it just makes me think about the death threat. It makes me think about, roving gangs in poor areas, just with machetes, and I don't know what kind of mayhem's going to come. But anyway, the public page has the articles and the interviews. It's good for the novices to take a look and come up to speed a little bit, because if you've been just watching Meet the Press and reading the Wall Street Journal, you are way behind the scene. You have no idea what's going on. The entire Eastern Hemisphere is working on a dollar alternative. It's not going to be based on the dollar. It's probably going to have eventually, I think as a stepping stone, fully convertible Chinese yuan for trade settlement. And all the different islands across the world, including the Western world, of the yuan swap facilities, they're going to be critically important for establishing the yuan as a secondary trade currency settlement currency. I didn't say that correctly, but you know what I mean. The yuan is going to be in secondary usage for trade settlement currency on a wide, broad basis. But eventually, the dollar alternative is going to be a gold-backed currency, and I think due to critical mass requirements, a set of them, a whole array of them. And the U.S. will have their own. They're going to call it the Republic Dollar or some such nonsense, and they're going to claim to have all kinds of deep storage gold and the oil petroleum reserve and fracked gas. So they're going to have contaminating gas. They're going to have quickly depleted oil reserve repository, and they're going to have an empty Fort Knox. That's going to be the backing for the dollar, which I think is going to be sold and devaluated into oblivion. So that's the movement, and the two reports for the Golden Jackass newsletter called the Hat-Trick Letter, the two reports each month is the Money War Report for high-level dealings and the Golden Currency Report for lower-level dealings. They're both important, high-level, low-level. You get them both, and it's a lot of work, but it's a labor of love. I love this work more than I've loved any job except one which I won't name.
Okay.
There's one that I was able to use a lot of my statistics arsenal, you know, the multivariate tools and data analysis, marketing research. I loved one particular job, and I loved the men and women I worked with, and that was a long time ago. That was 1984 to 1992. That was my favorite job. I liked it more than I liked this, but you know, this is important. There's nothing I've done that's more important than this. The Hetrick letter is becoming kind of a household name out there across the world, and I have a special gratitude to GoldSeek for helping to promote the work. It's a lot of good, mutually beneficial work where you post mine for free and you enable me to get new orders for the newsletter. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jim. Your articles are always interesting and provide a breath of fresh air, and you do attract quite a few visitors. Have oftentimes 10, 20, 50 plus thousand reads on your articles, and usually the most read on any monthly basis. So thank you for taking your time and spending quite a bit of time today and answering these questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all of them, but we look forward to having you back in the near future. So thank you, Jim, for joining us today.
Okay, I hope this is made available eventually for a clickable entry later for people to listen to. It was last time, and I hope it is again.
Yes, we will. I'll follow up with information on that. The last event attracted almost 15,000 views, so we'll post some details on that shortly. So we'll look forward to having you back in the near future. And again, thank you for your time and insights.
Okay, well, thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. This concludes the portion of our live event. As full disclosure, I am an investor in Seabridge Gold, and others within the GoldSeek team maybe as well. Seabridge Gold is a sponsor on GoldSeek.com. And for more information, please visit the website for full disclosure purposes. This is the end of the live event. We're sorry we weren't able to get through all the questions today. There were quite a few attendees and questions coming through, so we'll look forward to having Jim back here and Rudi Fronk to go through more of their questions here in the near future. As was mentioned, our live event will be edited and uploaded to our YouTube channel, which you will be able to find on GoldSeek.com in a couple days. So please look out for that. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to our next GoldSeek live event. Everyone have a great afternoon.